Hello, everybody. My name is Graham Elwood, and you are watching the Political Vigilante, making Gotham great again. It was on the island of Oahu. I did my show in Waikiki and just following some local news, but I saw that this made the national news. I didn't even realize this while I was there, that the Honolulu police shot an unarmed black man. And no protests happened. No mass protests after Honolulu police kill a black man. And this is the article. I'm going to show you a video in a second. Of Hawaii's 1.5 million residents, just 3.6% are black, according to the U.S. Census Bureau data. Yet in Honolulu alone, black people make up more than 70% of the people police use force against, according to Honolulu police data for 2019. Yeah, just to give you a little backdrop, the island of Oahu is almost 1.5 million people. The city of Honolulu is just under 1 million. It's like 900,000 to 1 million people. It's a big city on that island. The other islands have, the island of Hawaii has 170,000 people. Maui has 150,000, I think. Kauai has 68,000, and then the other smaller islands, Molokai and Lanai, are, like 3,000 or a couple hundred people or something. They're very small. Honolulu is a big city, and to give people a little backstory, these islands were illegally taken from the royal family, the Hawaiian royal family, in the late 1800s, But what happened when these islands were taken by the United States government, there's something, if you look it up, we'll probably cover it on Government Secrets, called the Bayonet Revolution, where they basically forced Princess Kaiulani to sit in the Ione Palace and forced her to sign documents saying that she was handing over Hawaii to the United States. So it was like, yeah, we're just going to put it's like mob style. We're going to put a gun to your head and sign this thing. Oh, hey, look, they want to give up the islands. But unlike what happened to in the rest of the U.S., slaves were brought to the U.S. from Africa, and so they never had rights. They were 3/5 a person, and that's why there's been, and then, police departments have been largely white and all this other stuff. But Hawaii is a little unique in that while the lands were illegally taken, the locals, Hawaiians, over the years have been able to kind of keep control of a lot of the local government. And so most of the cops are local Hawaiians, and firefighters, city councilor, a lot of they're locals. Hawaiians identify as sort of, Hawaii is sort of a Asian melting pot. So people will say, I'm Hawaiian, or I'm part Chinese, or because it's been an Asian melting pot for a long time. So, but my point is the cops are not like all white. They're mostly Hawaiian. I mean, that's what I see. So, and probably why, because there's not a very large, as we just showed, black population on this island specifically, but on these islands in general, but also because there hasn't been this history. So if the United States government, when it stole these islands in the late 1800s, and then all the cops and government were all white people, and the Hawaiian people were basically enslaved, had that happened, there might be more of a history of protesting the police and saying, we're not happy with the cops. But it's more, there was even some, I was told by some locals, like when a lot of the protests were happening last summer, there were some protests here, but there isn't this long history of cops, of like white cops shooting unarmed Hawaiian men. Like if there was a history of that, there might be more like protesting and outrage on Hawaii for this, but there hasn't been. So I hope this is making sense. So one of the reasons why this didn't make a lot, this wasn't like big in the news. This wasn't I didn't hear about it. I didn't hear a lot of people talking about it. There's people I follow on social media that live in Oahu, and I didn't see them talking about it. So there's that. I wanted to put that backdrop on there. Maini's death would have generated mass protests in any other American city, said Kenneth Lawson, a Black professor at University of Hawaii's law school. One reason for lack of outrage, he said, is that police have released limited details of what happened. Oh, well, gee, that's shocking. The cops, how come they can't just go, here's all the footage, here's all the chest cam footage, here's exactly what happened. They always release part of it because they always protect their own. This is the problem people have with cops in America is they're not transparent. They should be. And there should be civilian oversight, not cops investigating other cops. There should be civilian oversight. Just like we let the banks, banking people investigate the banks, or politicians that get money from the banks investigate. No, there needs to be civilian oversight. And on that civilian oversight needs to be people that have no relatives in the police department, get $0 or any influence from the police unions, and are literally just civilian oversight. That's one of the things that needs to happen. So again, Honolulu PD doing exactly what every LAPD and everybody else does. Oh, we're going to limit, we can't release the footage yet. Police released 2 brief clips from body camera footage, but it's difficult to make out what is happening in the dark. 3 shots ring out, and then an officer exclaims police. So what apparently happened was he went into what he thought was a temple, and people saw him and immediately called 911. And this gentleman is from Africa. His wife is white, but she's spent her whole life apparently in Hawaii. And so it's murky what exactly happened. And of course the cops are saying, oh, they did their, the police did their job. And it's like, well, we don't know. And, so I don't know. And one of the things that the wife said is, had he been living here a long time, he was new. They had just recently been married, I think, and he was new to the island. Had he been living here a long time and people knew who he was, there might be more like, hey, wait a minute. We've known this guy for years. He's not the type to go do this, like everybody knew who George Floyd was and said, or any number of examples of unarmed Black men that have been shot in the rest of the U.S. So I'll show you this video that was that Yahoo. This is from Yahoo News. So it's basically that video is just reiterating what was said. So, it's, and, Hawaii, I think, is about, white people are in the minority here. It's, I think, probably 70% Asian. And within that, I don't know the breakdown, there's people that are like Japanese, Korean, Chinese, and then the Thai, Vietnamese. And there's then there's Hawaiian, and there's Samoan, and there's a lot of mixed ethnicities, people, but mainly Asian. So it's, I don't know. I mean, hopefully the Honolulu PD will release more footage and talk about this more, but it's really the wife. I want to talk about this. So let me pull this up real quick. Yeah, there's been some local gatherings and small protests. According to the police account of the fatal shooting, Mayani entered a home that was not his, sat down and took off his shoes, prompting a frightened occupant to call 911. Outside the house, he ignored commands to get on the ground and physically attacked officers, leaving one with a concussion, police said. Okay. The chief, the retired police chief, Susan Ballard, who was white, said at the time officers reacted to behavior, not his race. Come on. Mayani's widow thinks he mistook the home for a Hare Krishna temple next door. Earlier in the day, the family had visited culturally significant places as they drove to Oahu's North Shore. At one point, the couple prayed together. She recalled because something felt off. He seemed stressed. Because of that, she thinks her husband, who was Christian and connected to his Zulu culture, was seeking out a spiritual place in his new neighborhood. Shortly before the shooting, she spoke to him by phone. He was on his way home some 5 blocks away. He was wearing his kili when he was shot. His widow said the traditional Zulu headband, along with taking his shoes off at the door, meant he went to the house with respectful intentions. Yeah, if you're a criminal, you don't take your shoes off at the door. So again, Hawaii is largely Asian culture, so everybody takes their shoes off here. Like the place I was staying at, I had to have some maintenance guys come in, and the maintenance guys took their shoes off at the door. So that's if you've ever lived in any sort of Asian culture, Asian part of the world, that's what they do. But everybody does that here. Like I always take my shoes off my place in LA, but I've had delivery guys come and they were like, "Oh, sorry, regulations, I can't take my shoes off." But they can figure that out in Hawaii. They can't figure it out in LA. Anyway, so that's the thing. You're not going to take your shoes off before you go in and like break in and commit a crime. Yeah. Yeah, there's also a lot of military here. There's 5 different bases. And so I think some of the Black community that works in the military is like, I don't want to protest because they can't. They'll get in trouble. They could lose their jobs. And this Ethan Caldwell, who is of Black and Asian descent and an assistant professor at ethnic studies at the University of Hawaii, said he can personally relate to the Mayani family feeling Hawaii would be relatively safer. I always ask a question of my students, safer for who? He said, Black folks have been present in the Hawaiian kingdom since prior to the illegal annexation, but rarely do we see here or disassociate them with the military in Hawaii in the present. Even though Hawaii is one of the few places where people of color are a majority, there are still anti-Black sentiment and institutional and individual levels. He said, noting how businesses in Waikiki boarded up their windows ahead of a peaceful Black Lives Matter march last summer. Wow, I didn't know that. We may not necessarily feel the same level of racism, anti-Blackness, discrimination, prejudice here as we do on the continent, but that doesn't mean we still don't face microaggressions on a daily basis, more for some people, Caldwell said. I think some people might be more willing to deal with those because it doesn't necessarily mean that their lives are at risk. But I think when it comes to seeing the more recent cases and the distance closing, the fact that it even happens here puts some of that into question as well. He said, referring to Honolulu police shooting and killing 16-year-old Micronesian boy on April 5th. Yeah. Acknowledging that Hawaii experiences racial bias in law enforcement like other parts of the country explodes the myth that this is a paradise, whether it is racial paradise or vacation paradise from all of your troubles on the mainland. He said, yeah, that's for sure. It's beautiful and there's a paradise and there's all this stuff, but it's still, there's traffic, there's meth, there's crime, there's, you come here on vacation and you're here for your 5-6 days or your week or whatever, and you just go to the beach and it's beautiful. But especially, again, I'm talking specifically, all the islands have drug problems and stuff like that because drugs are everywhere, unfortunately. I I heard that a member of the Kauai City Council, like a years ago, was like dealing drugs, and the cops chased him, and he threw meth out of his car window. This island, there was corruption on the city council. All this, it's got big city problems. In addition to being a very beautiful place, and people are pretty nice, but that's part of the problem with systemic racism, is especially with regards to Black people. They're viewed in the media, and have been for decades and centuries, really. I mean, but I've talked about it on this show, TV shows, movies, the big scary black guy, criminal, all that stuff. So that's infused into people. And, everyone is capable of being racist. Asians can be just racist too, and especially when you live on this island and you see these riots on the mainland in, Portland, and you're just shown, again, the media. And I talked about this last summer during the George Floyd protests, how the media would just make it seem like everything was fine. And then these hooligans started smashing stuff up and the cops had no choice. Like, that's how it's presented. So it's presented at like, oh, this should have been a peaceful protest, but people got mad. They don't, the media is never going to say, oh, the cops caused the problem. The cops stir it up. The cops cause the violence. They stir the violence. They provoke it. And so all they see are images of, Black people smashing windows in Portland or Minneapolis or whatever. And so then they're like, uh-oh, that's their view again, especially like if they emigrated here from another Asian culture where there's no Black people. I've been to Tokyo, Hong Kong, Singapore, Beijing, Shanghai. I mean, these are massive cities. These are tens of huge. Shanghai is like 40 million people or something. Like, these are huge cities, almost no Black people. So then you come from a culture where everybody's Asian, and you see some white people, and then you come to America, and then you see large portions of Black people in a lot of the cities, and you're going to just, they're going to have this scared view of it because that's what's been presented to them. That's part of the propaganda. That's part of systemic racism. A friend of mine that I went to high school with, her and I, our high school in Evanston, I've talked about Evanston before, is 40% Black. And she's lived here for a long time, and she went back to Chicago, and a friend of hers who grew up in Hawaii came with her, and they were riding the train. And my friend grew up like I did in Chicago. You ride the train, and this Asian woman, grew up in Hawaii, was like, oh my God, there's all these Black people, and she was scared. And my friend was like, what? We're just on the train. We're in Chicago. It's fine. Like, don't worry about it. But I bring that personal example up as that's just one person and one example of somebody from, living in Hawaii. But there's more of that attitude, I can almost guarantee you. If you grew up in an area where there's just humans in general, if you grew up where everybody pretty much looks like you, and then you go somewhere where there's other people that don't look like you, you're going to have a skewed view of that group. But specifically to Black people and in America, like African Americans are depicted as violent and gangs. And so people around the world come to America and are like, oh, the Blacks, and white people in America have that attitude. So this is an awful situation, of course, but I'm not that surprised, unfortunately, because when you depict a group of people as problems and criminals and trouble, then it permeates to cultures all over the world. I mean, and this couple lived in Denver, and in the article it says, in Denver, police stopped him while walking because he matched the description of a crime suspect. Has that ever happened? That's never happened to me. I've never been walking down the street and the cops go, hey. That never happens to me. That's never happened to me. That's happened to just about every Black guy that I know. Has had that happen at least once or twice. In South Africa, he would get ugly stares from some white people who saw her with a Black man. And this is the wife speaking, who's white again, but we live among Black people in South Africa, so they've always been welcoming to me. Lindsay Mayeni, the wife, is trying to extend her visa to stay in South Africa and will try to apply for permanent residency through her son. Hawaii is my home, so I really feel like I broke up with my country and my state, and like maybe I'll go back there one day. She said it's really hard to say, but right now I just can't fathom even visiting. So hopefully the Honolulu Police Department will release all of the body cam footage. I don't know why it's always so hard. Why are we only releasing part of it? Why can't we see all of it? Why is it always so hard for police departments to figure out, is it just a tech issue? They don't know how to download it correctly, or they can't edit it first, or they're trying to figure out how to circumvent. It's body cam footage, so that means our tax dollars pay for it. So all of us should be able to see it. All of us should be able to see it. And there needs to be an independent civilian investigation. If everybody looks at all the footage and it looks like this guy was committing a crime and the cops had no other choice, okay, fine, but why can't we see the footage? You can't show me part of the footage and then just have an ex-cop go, yeah, the cops did. Because cops always say, oh, the cop did what they're supposed to do. 99% of the time, cops defend other cops. So that's just that. It's just that. That's typically what happens. So I want to see the footage. I want to see the footage. So racism can happen anywhere, folks. Thanks for watching our show, folks. We're going to try to cover stuff that other people aren't and support what we do. Because like I say, I just want the truth. I want the truth in LA. I want the truth in Honolulu. I want the truth in anywhere. Dallas, Burma, Yemen. Just want the truth, man. Hiding the truth hurts everybody. And only hiding the truth and suppressing facts and information only makes things worse. It's like not dealing with a sickness. Like you think you might have a tumor and you're like, I'm not going to the doctor. And it gets worse and worse and worse. That's what racism is. That's what abuses of power are. They're tumors that just grow and grow and grow. You got to get it out. We got to talk about this. We got to be open about this. We got to have conversations. And policing, the way we train cops needs to change. I don't care if they're cops in Honolulu. I don't give a damn if they're in Portland or, Mobile, Alabama, or Miami, or New York City. The way cops are trained in America, it's not right. And the Honolulu Police Department, again, they shot a 16-year-old Micronesian boy April 5th. So there needs to be investigations on this stuff. And if you're a cop, and I know your first action is, Graham, you're wrong. It's a tough job. There's just a few bad apples. That's always the reaction from cops. Is that immediately? Actually, your reaction should be, you know what? We should have more transparency, because right now, a lot of Americans don't like the cops, don't trust the cops. And that immediate defending of cops when you're a cop is part of why people don't trust you. If you don't go, man, this ain't right, we got to investigate this. When I heard what Louis C.K. was doing, I didn't just, no, come on, defend him because I'm a guy comedian, he's a guy comedian. I was like, what a piece of shit. And get him out of there. And yeah. And that's what you need to do. You should want transparency. You should want cops abusing their power. You should want better training for cops. I mean, we've gone over this on Government Secrets with Lee Camp. Cops are given all this, like, hundreds of hours of weapons training and like 8 hours of de-escalation. Again, I want to see the dash cam footage. The body cam footage. I want to see the body cam footage. What was an unarmed man doing? Why was non-lethal force used? If he was being aggressive, you don't have tasers? You can't just tase the guy and then handcuff him and go, what the hell were you doing? Just have to go right to the gun? It's always right to the gun. So there's shooting, we're back to normal. We're opening up since the pandemic. It's so great to get back to normal, where there's a police shooting and a mass shooting every day. This past week, a bunch of mass shootings all throughout the U.S. Gun. So we need to do something. America is a sick place, and it's getting worse. So you got to speak up. You should want the truth. Don't hide it if you're a cop. Don't cover up. You should want the truth. The truth will set you free. Because if you keep hiding this and back the badge and the blue wall of silence, that's only going to make people trust you less and less and less. And that's only going to get worse. So thanks for watching this show. Support what we do. Go to patreon.com/Graham Elwood, rockfin.com/Graham Elwood. I appealed March 3rd to get remonetized by YouTube, and they said we'll have our answer in a month or so. That was 3 months ago. So it's a fair system we're living in. Real fair. Thanks for watching. Follow the money, connect the dots, get the truth. You want the truth, even if it's uncomfortable, even if you screwed up. People respect you when you go, I screwed up. You know what people don't respect? Liars and people that cover it up. I don't care who you are, cop, politician, regular person, husband, wife, business owner. I mean, I watch pro sports. I've been watching sports my whole life. And players and coaches, when they screw up, go, I screwed up. Versus players that go, oh, it wasn't my fault. Make excuses like, man, cry baby, you lost. Own it. Own it. You'll respect yourself too. And if there's some inkling within you, like, man, that was wrong. What we did was wrong. And you're covering up because I don't want to lose my job or whatever. Somebody lost their life, man. It was him or me. Was it? Was it? You had no other options. It's always no options. How come they can't use the taser? How come they can't use all these? They're taught all this non-lethal stuff, but they never use it. It's like they use the non-lethal stuff last, the guns first. It's a problem. Thanks for watching, everybody. You're all making Gotham great again. Shave your knuckles for justice. Boom. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please hit the like button, the subscribe button. Go to patreon.com/Graham Elwood and rockfin.com/Graham Elwood, where you can support the show. Also, I have a Bitcoin wallet, a Bitcoin Cash wallet, and an Ethereum wallet in the show notes. We're taking cryptocurrency. I have a Coinbase affiliation link. We're going to be getting on some other exchanges. So that's how you support the show. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. YouTube is unsubscribing us at an alarming rate. I have a PayPal button at GrahamElwood.com. I even have a Venmo at Graham-Elwood. There's a lot of ways to support our show. We are getting crushed by YouTube. We've dipped under 73,000 subscribers because of YouTube. Thanks for supporting what we do.